So, in this session, I'd like to talk about those all-important questions that you're putting your in your lesson plan as you're preparing your lesson plan. So we want those launching questions, and launching questions really do to have to do with observation. Now, in your Basics of Inductive Bible Study, there's actually a lot of good observation questions. There's a sheet there, the 30 observation questions. But of course, you don't have time for many. And often, apart from looking at the who question, which is always significant, to be asking the what question. What is it that the people have learned or observed as they've studied and prepared or looked at in the time given to them? And what did you learn from this section about? And then the question there. Or what did you discover in this passage? Or in this verse, what impressed you about the way Jesus interacted with the woman? It's this kind of question. What do you discover about the person here, the key character in this passage, about Abraham, for example? And what you're wanting is observation type answers. And of course, there may always be a little bit of drift into interpretation, but we're wanting them to learn to observe. Guiding questions. And then these questions may include such things as how do you think the first readers reacted to this? Or how do you think the Pharisees responded to what Jesus said? Or what areas was it that Jesus was engaging with? Why do you think this was written? Often interpretation questions are around the why question. The what question is more observation. The why question becomes interpretation. In your own words, what is it that the author is meaning by these phrases, or by this figure of speech, or by this terminology? These things are interpretation. And then you do need to keep the discussion on track. And as you do that, it can be helpful to ask questions such as, who else has a comment on this? To include the group. Or what else do you see in this passage or this verse? Does someone else want to add something? These are important questions. These are important questions to have up your sleeve. And what you want to do in summarizing questions is to be sure that the lessons are being learned and understood. The summarizing, so what have we discovered so far? And then we move into the application. Application questions, it's good to remind the group of God's attitudes and promises. And what we're wanting is to say, okay, we've had a good engagement with this. We've learned a lot about the individuals, the background, that which is going on. Now, what implications does that have for me in my situation and my circumstances? It can be helpful to actually get the group to write out their application. And what this does is it means that they have to be specific and then able to share that. But of course, the heart of application is being not just having a desire to know God's will, but to do God's will. And that comes down to those acts of obedience and submission to the word of the Lord. So, some tests. You think through your questions. How can you tell if it's a good question? Well, does it have clarity? That is, can it be understood? And can it be easily remembered? So that when you've asked a question, people are able to keep it in their minds. It's not so complex. And of course, to avoid the words and but, because then it does mean it's probably a complex question. Is it relevant? This may seem obvious, but it's good to ask the underlying purpose of the question. What is it that you're wanting this question to do? What answer do you expect, or what answer does it suggest? To whom is it directed? Is it a relevant question for the kind of group you have? There'll be a different question for a young people's group than maybe a group of business people. Young Christians or seekers after the faith to mature believers. And does it relate to truth already known? In other words, are you building on something that is understood? And if you are, you have to make sure that that understanding is really there so it can be built on. Is it relevant? Again, does it have enough information? Does the group have enough information to answer it? Or is it a question that you know because of your biblical studies experience? Does it focus attention on the main points? There's much that could be asked about many passages, but your time is limited and you need to keep it on track. Does it call for a possible and practical response? This is, of course, especially application. What is it that is to be done, and can it be done? And of course, does it help bring a clear understanding of the passage? Does it stimulate discussion? And does the question get the group's attention and lead to personal involvement? Does it leave room for individual creative expression? Or is it just a simplistic question? Does it give everyone an opportunity to respond? And again, the broader the question, the more people that can have input, rather than looking for just a narrow answer, kind of like a multi-choice answer question. And what we don't want to do is embarrass anybody in the group or make them feel focused or intimidated by the question.